The Hartford Circus fire would make a great story. It killed 167 people and injured more than 700 in a place that was supposed to be full of happiness and joy. Because of this famous photograph of sad clown Emmett Kelly with a bucket of water, it became known as the day the clowns cried. There's a 2-part series on Netflix that covered the entire history of American circuses. I wonder if SCP-1921 was inspired by this.
The Great Fire of London. What about the Great Beer Flood of London? The Spanish flu in 1918.
The Kyshtym disaster. Another disaster that I learned through this post. Had no idea about it previously. Came here to say this. The whole Mayak facility is a nightmare. Lake Karahay was particularly bad up to fairly recently. Centralia, Pennsylvania. Centralia is an incredibly cool story, but if it were to be an event from Pennsylvania, it should be the Johnstown, Pennsylvania flood. This was such a major catastrophic event. Over 2,200 people died and damages exceeding $474 million in modern estimates. All because some rich weirdos wanted a private resort lake that they modified and stripped of safety features to suit their aesthetic and budget. The dam creating the lake failed during heavy rainfall, causing a massive tsunami that ripped through the local area, picking up various debris, creating a massive wall of water, mud, masonry, and, miles of barbed wire after it went through the local Gautier wire works.
The Great Fire of Rome, with as much historical accuracy as possible, and the aftermath too. Or they could just make a high-budget, book-accurate new version of Quo Vadis. That would work too. HBO already had a miniseries about Rome with much emphasis on historical accuracy, and it's amazing. Smiley face.
The tsunami in Thailand in 2004, there's a really good film about it, but the name is escaping me right now. However, highly recommended. It wasn't just in Thailand. The Boxing Day tsunami killed 250,000 people across most of Southeast Asia. Halifax explosion. Despite living here, I didn't even think of that one as an option. For shame. Great suggestion. I read a book about it last year. Amazing how it created a bond between Boston and Halifax that lives on today. IIRC, Halifax recently revived the tradition of sending a Christmas tree to Boston to thank them for their help. Boston without hesitation loaded trainloads of relief supplies and medical specialists within 24 hours. They didn't wait, they just ran to help.
The Aberfan disaster, 1966.
Bhopal. It injured a lot of people, and the series of mistakes that caused it to occur is insane. Here's some more info. I agree. I feel like this disaster is really glossed over by people and not thought for being as terrible as it was. Also, people for the most part have barely even heard of it.
The Costa Concordia. The mixture of incredibly brave and competent people vs the idiot captain and the spectacular nature the disaster itself would make for some damn incredible television. I'd love to see lots of different perspectives on it. Have you heard the radio between the captain and I believe it was the Coast Guard? The captain's a real dingus. Craig Mazine's Twitter was inundated for a while with Indians asking him to do a series on Bhopal. For those interested in Bhopal, the Yes Men pulled a pretty amazing prank to call attention to the issue by going on the news imitating Dow Chemical and promising that they would finally pay for the disaster. Their stock dropped quite a bit and Dow Chemical had to go on the news and explain, "Oh no, we are not paying for the Bhopal disaster."
On that note, I recommend watching the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary on the Hillsborough Stadium disaster. What bothered me most about this is that the blame was completely put on the people that died. They were called hooligans, despite the fact that there were a million signs that showed that poor design and poor management led to this instead. I mean, they knowingly let in more people than what was considered maximum capacity.
Tiananmen Square massacre. Why would you want a TV series about absolutely nothing? There is no war in Ba Sing Se.
The Donner Party. I just read the fantastic book The Indifferent Stars Above, and their winter in the mountains was one of the most harrowing crazy fucking things I've ever read about.
BP oil spill, we're sorry. I agree only because we need widespread disapproval of the oil industry to balance out the hatred for nuclear power. There was that movie a couple of years back.
I would like the 1917 Canadian blast https://n, Wikipedia. Org, Wiki, Halifax_explosion, the largest man-made explosion until nuclear bombs in 1945. Was also going to say the Halifax explosion. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911. 150 died, most of them young women, because the doors were locked, to prevent workers from taking breaks and inventory, and they couldn't leave the building. This sparked outrage and spurred the development of many work safety standards we have today. Would have been a tragic show, but interesting to see how it changed the safety of work in the West. The owners of the building escaped alive via the roof and were indicted for manslaughter, got off with paying a fine. And then were found to have locked the doors at their next factory as well. Really puts the old adage that OSHA, work safety regulations are written in blood into context.
The Exxon Valdez oil spill. There's a series of episodes of American Scandal that almost scratch the surface of the shit that went down. Yeah, though I find anything too recent gets buried before any truth comes out. Chernobyl had the advantage that it happened a long enough time ago and no large corporations were involved that exist in the US. Exxon Valdez would be great, I remember reading up on that in school. Then saw it happen again and again.
Jonestown. John Goodman needs to play Jim Jones before it's too late. Please someone tell him. I hear they're making a comedy based on this. The only problem is you have to wait until the end of the movie for the punchline.
The bombing of Black Wall Street. It's one of the most devastating things to happen in America that rarely gets talked about. The first airstrike on US soil. I am this many years old and now learning about this? Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in 1911. I feel like this is being lost in time, yet it has more historical importance than other disasters listed here. TSF is the basis of modern workplace safety, union organizing and more. That would be a good one because of all of the changes that came because of it.
The Walkerton water tragedy, please. I lived through it. I wish someone would have told this story last year during the provincial election campaign. Instead we heard about how bad Ray days and cancelling gas plants were. The Great Storm that hit Galveston in 1900. Incredible damage, approximately 6,000–12,000 people died. It remains America's worst natural disaster. Lots of personal accounts to go on too. The book about that was amazing. As someone who grew up in Houston, it was fascinating to try to imagine different parts of the island as they were at the time. I am so thankful that I live in a time where radar exists and models provide days of warning so that we can stock up on beer and crash at a friend's house that's well inland.
Challenger. Sesame Street is on HBO now, so they could totally go into how Big Bird was nearly on the Challenger flight. There was actually a solid movie made back in 2013 by the BBC, The Challenger Disaster. It had Gary Oldman in it, and it was infuriating.